All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into the work of A.A. Milne. But, we're not venturing into the 100-acre wood this time.
No, no Winnie the Pooh today.
Right. Instead, we're going to be looking at one of his lesser-known pieces, a short play called The Boy Comes Home.
Oh, interesting.
And this play is actually something that's often studied in, bachelor arts programs. So there's
Sure.
got to be something special there, right?
Yeah, it might be a short play, but it's packed full of insights about family dynamics and generational shifts. And honestly, it's amazing how relevant it still feels today, even though, it was written almost a century ago.
Yeah, that's what I find so fascinating about Milne.
Yeah.
A lot of people just think of him as the creator of Winnie the Pooh.
Mhm.
But he actually wrote a wide variety of plays and novels for adults, too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he had a real knack for capturing the human experience, the joys, the sorrows, the complexities of it all.
Totally. So for listeners who might not be familiar with The Boy Comes Home, can you give us a quick rundown of the plot? What's the story about?
Okay, so picture this. It's 1918, right after World War I. And this young soldier, Philip, he returns home after 4 years of fighting. He's expecting, the hero's welcome to just slip right back into his old life. But things have changed while he was away. And his uncle, who runs the family business, well, he has different plans for Philip. He expects him to just fall in line and, follow in his footsteps.
So right away, we see that tension between the older generation and the younger generation coming back from the war. It's interesting, though, that Philip just assumes everything would be the same. I wonder, was that a common experience for soldiers after the war?
Yeah.
To, expect things to be unchanged?
Oh, absolutely. You have to remember, post-war England was grappling with so many anxieties. I mean, you had the economic recovery,
Yeah.
Changing gender roles, and of course, the psychological impact of the war.
Right.
Many soldiers, like Philip, they really struggled to readjust to civilian life.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And Milne, he uses this really clever symbol to represent that struggle. Philip's insomnia, his inability to sleep peacefully. It's like a physical manifestation of the trauma he brought back from the war.
Oh, wow, yeah. I remember that detail from the play. It's subtle, but it's so powerful.
Right.
The way Milne describes Philip's restlessness at night, tossing and turning, it really drives home the point that the war has fundamentally changed him.
Exactly. And it's not just Philip who's changed, right? The world around him has shifted too.
Of course.
Like his uncle, he represents that older generation clinging to the old ways of doing things. He just can't understand or refuses to understand, what Philip went through.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're speaking different languages.
Right.
They're from the same family, but their experiences have made them so different.
Yeah, it's like a communication breakdown.
And speaking of language, one thing that always stands out to me about Milne's writing is his dialogue. It's just so witty and sharp, even when he's dealing with these heavy themes. Do you have a favorite example of that from The Boy Comes Home?
Oh, there are so many good ones. But there's this one scene that always sticks with me. Philip's trying to explain to his uncle, what it was like to be in the trenches. And his uncle just brushes him off and he's like, oh, come on, it couldn't have been that bad. You were only gone for 4 years.
Ugh, it's so dismissive.
Right. And on the surface, it almost sounds funny, but underneath it reveals this huge gap in understanding between those who experienced the war firsthand and those who didn't.
Exactly. And that's that classic Milne move. Using humor to highlight a really serious issue.
Yeah.
It makes you really think about how people communicate or maybe miscommunicate during times of, upheaval and change. And it's not just the dialogue that adds depth to the play, right? Milne also uses setting in a very deliberate way.
Oh, absolutely. The setting is crucial. I mean, the play opens in this dimly lit room, right?
Right.
And it immediately creates this sense of uncertainty and almost a gloominess, which reflects the mood of England after the war. It was a time of, rebuilding and healing, and there was this underlying sense of unease.
That's a really great point. It's fascinating how a simple detail like lighting can add so much depth to a play and contribute to the overall atmosphere.
Yeah, it sets the tone.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of students who are studying this play will be thinking about potential exam questions.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So what kind of question do you think a professor might ask about The Boy Comes Home? Something that would really get students thinking.
Well, going off of what we were just talking about with the setting, a good question might be, how does Milne use the setting to reflect the changing social landscape of post-war England?
Oh, that's a good one.
because it forces students to think about how all these elements of the play, like, the lighting, the time period, all those details, how they work together to create a bigger picture.
Exactly, exactly. It makes you analyze those choices that Milne made as a playwright, and how they all contribute to the meaning of the work. Speaking of meaning, one thing I'm still pondering is that ending. It's so open-ended. What do you think Milne was trying to convey by leaving things unresolved like that?
That's one of the brilliant things about Milne. He doesn't tie everything up neatly with a bow. He gives you just enough to spark your own imagination and encourage your own interpretation.
Right.
Like, we're left wondering, what's going to happen to Philip? Will he find his place in this new world? Will he ever truly reconcile with his uncle? And, on a larger scale, what's the future of England going to look like?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all up in the air. And I think that's part of what makes this play resonate so strongly, even, nearly a century later. It's not
Yeah.
just about this specific time and place, but it's about these universal human struggles,
Yeah.
right? Trying to communicate, adapting to change, finding your place in the world when everything feels like it's shifting beneath your feet.
Precisely. I mean, The Boy Comes Home may be a short play, but it really packs a punch. It prompts us to reflect on how our own experiences shape us, how we relate to others and how we navigate a world that's constantly in flux.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I encourage all our listeners to check out The Boy Comes Home. If you haven't already, it's a short read, but it'll definitely give you a lot to think about.
I second that.
All right, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And until next time, happy reading, everyone.
Yeah, see you later.